Pokémon as a franchise has been steeped in nostalgia so much it's often hard to gauge the quality of one of its games, movies, anime seasons, TCG sets, mobile games, etc. until you've played or seen it yourself. As someone who's been in the series for nearly 15 years now and is only 21, I've missed out on a lot of the more nostalgic pieces of the franchise that I love so dearly, and it's led me to have a lot more of a jaded view on the older games and stories than other people have. I grew up in the black and white era, but never ended up playing any of the games until XY was released, but I still collected Pokémon cards. I even got a Zekrom from Black and White base set that I've held onto. I watched the anime, I had plushies and watched YouTube videos. By all means, I was the epitome of a Pokémon fan, only I'd never actually played a game. That was, of course, until 2013, with the release of X and Y for the 3DS. I was hooked. I could never put it down, and from then on I've played and completed every single Pokémon game. I've put thousands of hours into shiny hunting and Pokédex completion, customizing characters, making OCs, writing videos, and making art, but I'd still never played half the catalog. It's an odd experience, being such a big fan of something you've truly not consumed a large portion of. And it's not for lack of trying, mind you. These games get very expensive to own physically, and most of them don't even exist on modern platforms. As of last year, when I started making Pokémon videos again, I decided it'd be best for me to go back and replay a bunch of the older games, just to give myself not only more to talk about, but a better view on the franchise I love. Of course, I started this right during an era of revisionism around the Black and White era, of course, the Pokémon cycle repeating as usual, as the people who grew up on it began to grow up and leave their phase of their childhood franchise behind. Being the last good game they played, it becomes the center of discussion. So, I thought, why not start there? Black and White wasn't a bad stepping stone. I've played my fair share of randomizers and Nuzlockes on that game since it's so easily accessible to do so why not? If you've been following me on Twitter for a while, you might have seen my playthrough through various posts about it. Needless to say, for a large part, I really did not enjoy it. Most of the modern comforts of Pokemon's vastly improved gameplay were not present, and large parts of the game, while visually interesting, were pretty underwhelming or boring to say the least, and while I wanted to enjoy the story, grand majority of it was really run-of-the-mill for Pokemon, and every conflict was resolved rather quickly. All of this criticism, of course, leaves out the one glaring exception to every critique I've levied up to now. Team Plasma is the best evil team in all of Pokemon, and everyone knows that. It's really not very close. Every time N popped up on my screen, it was like I completely locked in. It felt like I was playing an entirely different game, one with infinitely better storytelling than the one I'd been complaining about on Twitter for hours already. All of this comes to a head after the battle with N in his castle at the end of the game, where he says, "I couldn't understand it. I couldn't believe that there were Pokemon that liked people, because up until that moment, I'd never known a Pokemon like that. The longer my journey continued, the more unsure I became. All I kept meeting were Pokemon and people who communicated with one another and helped one another. That's why I needed to confirm my beliefs by battling with you. I wanted to confront you, hero to hero. I needed that, more than anything. There's no way a person like me, someone who understands only Pokemon, no, actually, I didn't understand them either. There's no way I could measure up to you, when you had so many Pokemon and were surrounded by so many friends. The champion has forgiven me, and what I should do now is something I'll have to decide for myself. You said you have a dream. That dream, make it come true. Make your wonderful dream a reality, and it will become your truth. Follow the path of truth to make that dream a reality, and someday you'll achieve all that you've dreamed of." I left the screen on N's final piece of dialogue to the player, utterly and completely overwhelmed by a feeling of hope within my mind. It's a feeling I get every time I finish a Pokemon game, and for whatever reason, really only hit me when I finished this one. N's final speech, a message not to the protagonist but to the player themselves, is a plea for them to find their place in the world, not by pursuing the truth and ideals of others, but by pressing forward and living for oneself. This man, an enemy by all definitions for the entirety of the game up to this point, who has spent his life trying to liberate Pokemon from what he perceives as their captors, realizes in one fell swoop that his entire life was a lie. His response isn't anger, but a realization that the way to move forward lies with hope and optimism. The formula for changing the world is not a force, but a chemical reaction of differing ideals that blend together to form a better future, a future all our own. 16 years after its initial release, that message still struck a chord so powerful with me, a 21-year-old sitting alone in his college dorm, that I immediately had to start writing about it. I couldn't believe I'd missed out on that for so long. I was practically punching my 5-year-old self for not asking for it for Christmas. Pokemon had already done a lot to shape the person I am today, and it just made me wonder, how different would I be if I'd seen that when I was a kid? Pokemon, at its core, is a game about the relationship between humans and nature. Despite the rocky relationship that humans have with nature in the real world, the depiction of it in the Pokemon world has always been idealized. People in Pokemon live in harmony in utopian cities with corporations that care about them and politicians with their actual best interests in mind. They often live right beside the magic our world is so devoid of, the very same magic that fuels the imaginations of the very children that inspired the franchise itself. You might have heard the tale that Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of the Pokémon franchise and president at Game Freak, was inspired to create Pokémon based on his childhood hobby of collecting bugs. This story gives a great insight into the themes behind Pokémon. The idea that these beings we hear about in storybooks and local legends might be just as easy to capture and study as a beetle sitting on a tree, and that it's our imaginations which make the myth become real. So it makes sense that for the first few Pokémon games, the villains which the story stands in thematic opposition to are the people who value humans' livelihoods above Pokémon. Evil adults without the best interests of Pokémon or other people in mind. They're people out to claim their own personal utopia, to morph the world by any means necessary into what benefits them, or their twisted vision of what the world needs the most. It's up to the children at the center of the story to show them that they're wrong, through their unique ability to see the world for the beauty that it really is, their imagination. But, and excuse me for saying this, it's not always this black and white. See, the real world is far more nuanced than that. Every situation is complex, every side has a story, and sometimes those with the most stories to tell are those who cannot even tell them to us. We knew from the outset that Pokémon and their trainers are a symbiotic relationship, more akin to family than pets, but those in universe can't fully know that. They can't talk to their Pokémon, they can't see the text boxes that tell us how our Pokémon are feeling, so when a man named Ghetsis appears and begins to preach that Pokémon are truly better off without their trainers, who are we to tell him that he's wrong? Pokemon Black and White took a strong departure with its story. While previous games had cartoony, tropey supervillains, the region of Unova is home to a much more conniving villain. Ghetsis' character is not a complex one, and he stands as the main reminder that despite the mature themes on display, this is still a kid's game, one which needs a cartoony villain. However, whereas a villain like Archie or Maxie are upfront with their tactics, their maniacal laughter, and unlimited army of faceless goons, Ghetsis has orchestrated a cult, perfectly engineered to usher in the New World Order as efficiently as possible. At the center of this cult, in the middle of Team Plasma's 7 sages, lies a mysterious orphan child, adopted by Ghetsis and fed lies about the nature of human-Pokemon relations. A child with the special power to hear the very words that a Pokemon is thinking. Ghetsis groomed this child for his entire life, raising him for no other purpose than to become the face of his movement, the only one worthy to wield the power of Zekrom and Reshiram, to become the king of Team Plasma, and rewrite the world's truths to fit Ghetsis' ideals. The face he shows the world is one of compassion for Pokemon, and despite his soldiers wielding Pokemon in battle themselves, he preaches the very thing he told all of his soldiers and sages, and the very thing he told N to believe, that Pokemon are better off without their trainers. N's character needs no introduction. Unlike his father, N is one of the most popular human characters in the entire franchise, most notable for the billion Pokemon cards with his face on them, the 100 plushies he inspired, and the fact that Pokemon Masters uses him like a mascot whenever they run out of money. Besides his androgynous features, beautiful face, and cool design, what makes N really stand out is the complexity tied to his story arc. N starts out as this enigmatic figure with ties to Team Plasma, and through the story evolves to become something like a friend or rival to the player. He begins to understand the complexity of the world around him. It was never his dream to split up humans and Pokemon, it's just what he was taught. It was never his dream to capture the legendary Pokemon, it's just what he was told to do. His worldview was shaped wholly from the desires of humans and the abuse of Pokemon. So when he discovers you, a person whose Pokemon seem not only to like them, but love them, who are willing to stay by their side forever, he begins to get confused. He takes a liking to you, notices how different you are from what he was told. He tells Ghetsis about you, and he uses that to fuel his manipulation of N. He tells N you are special, that you are the villain of N's story. The numbers and calculations that make up Team Plasma's world formula are absolute. This is simply another variable that needs to be solved in order to progress. Calculations, formulas, and numbers are extremely important to N and Team Plasma, and the existence of you, an outlier in Ghetsis' perfect world, throws that out of line. N's entire character is built around these numbers, but I really haven't seen much speculation on what that could mean. And to be honest with you, I'm pretty stumped myself. I think it's reasonable to assume that the theme of prime numbers and firsts in his design and story are meant to emphasize him as an oddity in the world, something which shouldn't exist. He has mysterious powers, no parents, and lives in the forest by himself. Almost nothing is actually known about N, and the fact that he's such a blank slate is something that Ghetsis uses to manipulate him. I think, though, that N desires things to be structured and orderly. The puzzle cube he wears is representative of this, an endless set of infinite structures and perfectly straight lines that never end, representing a perfect world made up of a balance of truth and ideals, a world that fundamentally cannot exist, but one he's been conditioned into believing is within reach. His meeting with the player sows the seed of doubt that what he's learned is true, but a conversation with Ghetsis only further reinforces his beliefs. Ghetsis restructures the conflict in his favor, changing uncertainty to a hard truth, a shaky motivation into an unshakable ideal. He points to Sharon, who pursues the ideal of strength, and to Bianca, who's discovering the truth that strength is not always obtainable. But you're a neutral presence, and you are to be chosen. Chosen as what? N doesn't know. Ghetsis never tells him because he doesn't know either. The reality is that you threaten what Ghetsis stands for. You're a Pokemon trainer whose Pokemon love them, who isn't swayed by unfortunate truths or virulent ideals. You threaten N's loyalty, and you must be eliminated. Still, N manages to make up his own reason. When values mix, the world becomes gray, something which is unforgivable in his eyes. He must maintain that the world is black and white, perfectly distinct and separate, structured and orderly. He cannot allow a world in which people think and act for themselves, because while he convinced himself he knows Pokemon, it seems like he doesn't understand them at all. You can really see the inner conflict eating away at him in these scenes, with how he raises his voice at Professor Juniper in Jarstone Cave and runs off. He holds a rigid belief that the world is filled with people who only use their Pokemon, and he's desperate to find a way to justify the existence of someone who so clearly doesn't fit that mold. Luckily, in Mistralton City, he finds exactly that. If you can't justify something's existence, make up an exception in your head. If everyone were like you, player, maybe we wouldn't have to take everyone's Pokemon away. He wants the world to change without forcing it to. He thinks that with the power of the legendary Pokemon on his side, people will be forced to believe his ideals and understand his truth. He has such a childish view on how people think, but even he can't wrap his head around splitting up people and Pokemon who so clearly care about each other. Even going so far as to say it completely breaks his heart, but he still thinks he has to do it. Ghetsis convinced him that this is the only way that the world can be saved. The gate now becomes a battle over whose belief is correct. Is it N, who believes he understands the formulas that make up the world, whose conviction is so strong it bent the will of the very legendary Pokemon that controls the region? Or is it you, a child from Unova that earned the respect of the legendary Pokemon? The answer is easy. Of course it's you. But N doesn't go down that easy. The weight of the conflict lands so heavy on him. His determination is absolute, and he no longer cares about hurting the Pokemon he claims are his friends, so long as it serves his goal of freeing all Pokemon, while simultaneously not realizing he's become the very thing he wished never existed. He deludes himself into thinking that despite the clear bond your battles have established, he cannot possibly see the good in you. You're just another person who uses Pokemon for their own gain. Nothing more, nothing less. But it's like he said earlier in the game. Feeling sorry for yourself and feeling bad for the Pokemon you used to battle only means that you cannot win. And so he doesn't. But defeating him in battle makes something click in his head. If he was supposed to prove himself as a hero by obtaining the legendary Pokemon and defeating the champion, and you just did the same thing, does that mean you're both the hero? Is it even possible for two heroes to coexist? One believing in the power of ideals, the other understanding the truth of the world? A formula is the interaction between two ingredients, all for a desired result. You apply numbers to the variables in a formula and it gives you a solution. You add two heroes together, the chemical reaction of differing views and interpretations, the mixing of colors and values to paint the world into a better place. It all requires different ideas to exist in the first place. Neither black nor white are truly colors, merely values created by diluting what makes each color special, but by mixing those complementary opposites together, you get gray. That gray is what makes the world work, but it means that all people, all ideas, all colors of the world must work together. Ghetsis cannot have that. It might have been obvious to me as an adult, playing through the games, that Ghetsis was never in it for the city and livelihood of Pokemon. But to a child, I can really see how this twist can work. Ghetsis never really cared for Pokemon or people. He wanted them split up so he could be the only person with a Pokemon, and take over the world uncontested. Even still, even after all of this, he fully believes that N is on his side, even after calling him a defective, useless child, a computer for him to program, a freak without a human heart. It's this very belief that causes his downfall. It causes his ordained king to finally break free of the chains Ghetsis had imprisoned him under. For the first time in his life, N's future is entirely up to him. This realization is what makes him pull you aside, to tell you the line that I put towards the intro of this video. Dream your dream. Follow the path that'll make your dream a reality. If anyone can do it, it's you. Somehow, someway, no matter what the world tells you, no matter how ridiculous your dream may seem to those around you, never stop dreaming. You can make it there someday. If anyone can achieve your dream, it's you. N, a child born without an understanding of anything in the world around him, warped by evil people to serve their twisted needs, never allowed to live his own life. You, the player, an entirely ordinary child who followed their path exactly how they wanted, meeting people and Pokemon you would have never thought possible. And it's N telling you to dream your dream. If anything, you're the one who should be saying that to him. Something about that, someone who just now realized they're allowed to make decisions for themselves, telling you to do whatever it takes to achieve your dreams, it just hits so much harder. There's this semi-obscure cutscene in black and white that I think further supports N's character, and it's one that I almost never see discussed. On Friday, in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, after finishing the main story and the post-game with Zekrom and Reshiram, you can visit N at the Nimbasa City Ferris wheel. It's the same place where N discussed his love of theorems and circles. It's the same place he told you he's the king of Team Plasma. You can ride it with him, help him relive the memories of the day his world grew bigger, and you can keep doing it, every Friday. It's after those subsequent Ferris wheel rides that he says the line that ties this whole video together. Puts a nice little bow on the character arc that N underwent throughout the Unova games. Ferris wheels sure are great, but you can't prove that with numbers. It's the Incompleteness theorem. This line stands in direct opposition to his first time on the Ferris wheel, where he tries to explain his love for them away with theories and formulas. But what's changed? The Incompleteness theorem? Well, it turns out the Incompleteness theorem is a real thing. It's a theory put forward by Kurt Gödel in 1931, and it states one simple thing that is inherent and true to all life, but cannot be stated with numbers or proofs. No consistent system of axioms whose theorems can be listed by an algorithm is capable of proving all truths about the natural numbers. Essentially, there will always be things which are inherently true, but can never be proven. Ghetsis believed that his perfection was an inherent truth, proven by his power and status, but it was ultimately disproven by the failure of his plan and collapse of his empire. That incomplete truth is that no human is perfect. N believed that people in Pokemon were separate beings, meant to be separated, and the truth of the world was split into black and white. But this was disproven by his loss to you in the Pokemon League. The incomplete truth is, the world is more often a reaction of thoughts and ideas, not one divided by logic and emotion. N goes from explaining his love of Ferris wheels as circular motion, mechanics, and formulas, to being unable to explain it as anything other than what it is. Ferris wheels are great. The unprovable truth of the world is that sometimes things just are the way they are, muddled and gray. To reiterate what I said at the start of the video, it's not always black and white. If you try to understand all of the inner workings of the world, you're going to be left trying to explain the most basic things, and you're not going to be able to explain any of it. 1 is 1. 2 is 2. Natural numbers are natural for a reason. They exist to be the building blocks of everything we know. The world is like a puzzle block, but the deeper you go, you realize that it's all built on itself, and at some point it's impossible to solve. Some things are just true. My friends make me happy, sad movies make me sad, bad things make me angry. These emotions do not need truth to exist. You feel them every day. They're complex responses to outward stimuli, but despite our ability to explain them away with chemicals and psychology, we can never rid ourselves of them. They're a fundamental part of our everyday lives. A human without emotion is not a human. It's in these unprovable truths of the world that dreams sit, explained away by science as a collection of memories distorted by one's own cognition. But even as a scientist myself, I just cannot believe that this is fully true. Dreams aren't something you can solve. You can look at them and imagine what your life could be like, try to solve the chemical reactions that make your brain picture the best possible future for yourself, how you could change the world, a different way to pet your cat, a new hobby you want to learn, or you could forget about solving them and follow the path that you need to follow. Only you can make your dreams a reality. You're the one who dreams that dream. It's like snowflakes. No two dreams are the same. An ideal world governed by truth is not possible. A world in which humans and nature live in perfect harmony is not possible. Neither is one where we're entirely separate. It's an unprovable truth of the world. The ideal world is not possible. But that's overly pessimistic, don't you think? N didn't come to the realization that his perfect world was impossible and immediately gave up. No, he saw it not as a roadblock, but as an expansion of his world. Maybe we can't all live in harmony, but without nature, we'd all die. It's up to us to work out the best way to live with nature. That's what N's real dream is. Once all is said and done, and the black and white have merged into gray, and the icy burden of the truth of the world has finally melted away, an ideal future reveals itself to those who want to look. This has been talked about to death, but the philosophy that defines N's story is the same one that the legendary Pokemon represent, which is also why the ideologies that they represent are so flawed. Most of you already know this, but the Tao Trio are based on the Taoist belief of the yin and yang, the complementary concepts that believe that the world is an amalgamation of cooperative yet counteracting forces that perpetuate one another. This is most often displayed using a black and white symbol like this. What separates the Tao from the Pokemon based on it is that within the connected Tao, a piece of both sides exists. For example, in Unova's mythology, The yin represents ideas, while the yang represents truth. And while separated, both of them represent a flawed system in which objective truth is left without ideals, and idealistic dreams are left without any truth. Zekrom is the yin, most often representing the feminine, the moon, the passive, being covert, and the negative. Reshiram, the yang, represents the masculine, the sun, the active, being in the open and positive. Zekrom and Reshiram also both represent extremes of heat and energy through lightning and fire, and contain elements of contrasting softness and sharpness in their designs, even down to their secondary colors of red and blue being mirrored on each other. Every part of their design is meant to contrast the other in every way, shape, and form. They literally, both in universe and out, do not function without one another. That's why part of N's plan makes no sense. You can't change the world with only one of them. If the other is non-existent, like a world of truth with no ideals, dominated by objectivity and not emotion, or a world of ideals without any truth, where rationality is decided by the strength of one's ideals and not fact, then everything begins to fall apart. One cannot overstep the other, and so there must be a boundary in between. A boundary of limitless nothingness that allows truth and ideals to merge and mingle eternally. The circle which encases the two halves of the Tao. That's where theorem comes in. I've intentionally stopped talking about theorem or Black and White 2 for most of the video up until now. And that's mostly because N's character arc is almost entirely contained within the first games, and not really expanded on as much as the second games, save for the mention of the Incompleteness theory, which, again, we'll return to. But that's not to say that theorem isn't important. In fact, it might represent the most important piece of the puzzle so far. Whereas Zekrom and Reshiram represent truth and ideals, elegance and strength, sharpness and softness, the vast white and the deep black, theorem represents none of those things. It's the ultimate zero, a Pokémon entirely devoid of truth and ideals, missing a key component in order to make it whole. While Zekrom and Reshiram have concrete lore and history regarded as heroes, theorem's history is muddled in misinformation, and as a result, it's often considered a villain. But theorem is none of these things. It's simply a piece of a larger puzzle, that being the original dragon. The history and origin of the original dragon is hotly debated within the Pokémon universe, but its true origin story is nothing in terms of importance in comparison to what it represents. At one point, it was perfect. A union between truth and ideals, with the boundary in place so not one can overtake the other. It wasn't until human conviction tore the two apart that they became unstable, leaving behind theorem. Lightning is a jolt of active energy, and heat is energy moving increasingly fast, but cold is slow. Absolute zero is the slowest possible, a complete lack of movement in the particles that make up the world. Without truth, without ideals, you're left with a border that divides nothing. And in that search for something to fill the void expands, leaving nothing but icy stagnation in its wake. That's why theorem must absorb its pieces and return to the original form. By taking truth and ideals into its body, it can attain some of the power it once had in its original form. But even when it overtakes, there's still fragments of ice remaining, symbolizing that it's still incomplete. Counteracting, yet complementary forces forever intertwined. In a way, it represents the themes of every Pokémon game, with a tertiary mediating force almost always present to complete the story. Land and sea are not complete without the sky. Gravity and antimatter allow time and space to exist. Life and death must exist in a careful balance. Sun and moon are lights shining among infinite darkness. The story of a hero is incomplete without a villain, and the past and future can't exist without the present. In Pokémon Black and White, there exists only two sides. In Black and White 2, though, a third enters the picture. Ghetsis wants his own world by any means possible, and rather than twisting the truth and manipulating people's ideals to make it happen, he's resorted to allowing theorem's yearning to freeze all of Unova so he may conquer it, pouring his desires into the empty vessel that is theorem in order to perform a show of power that Unova can't ignore. What is true, what would be ideal, and what you desire. That is the third theme of Unova. Desire. So how does this relate to N's speech, and to the incompleteness theorem? N believes that in order to make your dream a reality, you must pursue truth and ideals. To satiate your desire for a world of truth, you must examine people's ideals. In order to satiate your desire for an ideal world, you must examine its inherent truths. Dreams are a form of desire, and the world would be incomplete without them. But desire is not a concrete term. Truth is an objective fact, and ideals are what's objectively best. Desire is too individual to be concrete, too subjective to be objective. It can strike hard like lightning, be raging like fire, but at the same time it can be nothing at all. A desire towards truth motivates Reshiram, and a desire towards ideals motivates Zekrom. But nothing motivates theorem except for yearning, an empty vessel of desire whose only wish is to reunite with something that can give it a goal to work towards. It is a desire without anything to desire. The world would be incomplete if energy didn't desire to move, and on the other hand, the world would devour itself if energy didn't stop moving once in a while. The incompleteness theorem means that there's things that are natural to the world, like numbers, energy, love, happiness, sadness, and desire, that we can never truly explain. The world is a careful mix of colors, including the values of black and white. And while the combination of all of those bright and vibrant colors will eventually muddle into gray, that isn't something you have to fight. It's an objective truth that we can't explain. The world cannot exist without this ocean of thought and desire. What started as me talking at the wall about the themes of a game that I only kinda liked turned into a discussion of Chinese mythology, mathematical theorems, and the nature of the universe itself. I guess that's why people really like these games, right? It's clear that a lot of thought was put into the philosophy that drives Unova's story. But at the same time, it's a shame so much effort went into that, since it was part of a game that was a massive risk by Game Freak. A risk that, in the end, didn't pay off as well as they'd hoped. Black and White still remains among Pokemon's worst-selling games, and despite my constant beef with Unova for many other reasons, I have to say that that's a shame. It's rare to find a kids game with so much in the way of symbolism and unique storytelling like this, and they really only managed to recreate the magic of it a few times after that. To some, though, nothing will ever reach the peak the Team Plasma storyline did. And honestly, I don't really blame those people. But you shouldn't stagnate yourself to satiate your inner child. Don't force yourself to hate things because they're new. Keep experiencing things, keep dreaming, and make your world a better place. The only way to expand your world is to experience new things. So don't let yourself stay trapped. That's all I have to say about this, and I know it's a lot. But I hope you enjoyed it regardless. There's plenty of video essays that talk about all of this in an infinitely better way than I could. But I still wanted to put my thoughts out there because, that's what I made the channel for. If you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe so you can see more of me, and I hopefully see you next time. Okay, now that everyone who doesn't care is gone, I do have a couple things to say regarding the channel update. If you have been following me for a little bit, you'll know that this is a completely different method of video that I've been doing recently, and also the channel completely rebranded in the time since my last video. Whoopsie daisy. There is supposed to be a video out in between the last one and this one, which would have explained all of that in the beginning, but I ended up not really liking it, and I'm going to retool it and rewrite it and put it back out there. Essentially what I wanted to do was I wanted to make content that wasn't Pokemon, and I also wanted my brand identity not to be tied to a copyrighted character, so I just made my own. Yeah, I mean, I hope you guys like the new character and the new model and stuff like that. I'll hopefully eventually get a model for streaming so that way I can actually do live streams for people, but I don't really have time for that right now. I have a job. So if you like it, let me know. If you don't, If you have any good references for somebody who makes live 2D models, let me know. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!